Well, we're going to talk about the rest of the rotation after a quick word from Living for We podcast. What happens when a regular day at school turns into the worst day of your life? Unfortunately, that's a reality that happens way too frequently in today's world. Gun violence is the leading cause of death for young people in America, and in communities of color, the impact is even greater. Every bullet fired creates two victims, the person in front of the gun and the one pulling the trigger. Living for We, Keep Your Head Up is an award-winning podcast that focuses on real stories, real struggles, and real solutions in Northeast Ohio. New episodes drop every other Tuesday, including tomorrow, where you'll hear from host Marlene Harris-Taylor and her new co-host, Maisha Watkins, the executive director of the Cleveland Peacemakers. No one does a better job of bringing you stories from the front lines, victims, survivors, and those fighting for change. Each episode, they sit down with different organizations that are working to end gun violence and provide resources for those affected by gun violence. Listen to Living for We wherever you get your podcasts, or watch the video version on IdeaStream's YouTube channel. You can learn more at ideastream.com/podcast/Living for We. Subscribe today to Living for We on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, a new episode drops tomorrow. So with the Bibee news, we also got an official confirmation from Stephen Vogt about the Guardians' starting rotation this year. Steve, you take tag board full. This was Zach Meisel, who said the Guardians' fifth starter will be Logan Allen, but the ace, Bibee, the second, Gavin Williams, third starter, Luis Ortiz, Ben Lively, in the fourth spot with Logan Allen rounding out the top five, McKenzie starting the year in the bullpen. Jason, right idea to start with Allen in the fifth spot and McKenzie in the bullpen, or in general with this top five, any issue with it?
No, I mean, listen, you're not going to roll with these five guys from now till September. There's going to be a lot. Joey Cantillo, I think, is going to play a big role on this team at some point this summer. You hope Triston McKenzie will as well. He just doesn't. He's just getting hit too hard right now, and I don't think you can trust him. I totally get. Plus, they probably want to get one more look at Logan Allen before you decide yes or no, is this guy part of our future or not? So I would hope that McKenzie will get a chance to start at some point this year, but he's going to have to prove it. You sort of slid it in the last conversation. I agree. He probably should have had the surgery. That's the way it's looking 100%. That's the way it's looking right now.
It's still lurking out there.
Yeah, and he's never been the same pitcher, unfortunately, since. So he may still have to make that decision at some point this year. But, you want good health, obviously. Slade Ciccone is another guy who you would think is going to make an impact at some point. There's going to be more than these five guys that start games for the Guardians. It's just the nature of the game. But I have no issue with starting with these five. I kind of want to get one more look at Logan Allen too. I don't think he's a long-term solution for this rotation. But you want to give guys a chance to grow and learn. And he's had some good moments, and he's been hit hard. And this may be his last chance to really prove that he belongs as one of the five guys on this team.
Yeah, I agree with everything. I always laugh when a team breaks camp and they say, here's our rotation.
Yeah. For the first week of April.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, go back and count, and you can do it on one hand, the teams in the last 10 years.
Oh, my God.
That have started the season and ended the season with the same starting rotation.
I don't know if it's happened once in 10 years.
It probably hasn't.
When they were the Indians, they did it that year Kevin Millwood was here.
That was a while ago.
You know what? Everybody did have freakishly crazy health that year.
They only used five starters the entire year.
I bet it's the only time it's happened.
It's the only time in my lifetime I can recall it happening with this team.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's happened in baseball before.
And like you said, Jay, I agree. There is something intoxicating about Logan Allen. His stuff, to me, doesn't equal his results. And there's a lot of pitchers, by the way, where I feel that way. But when I just look at his stuff, I feel like his ERA should be far lower than that. His whip should be way lower. It's good stuff, but he gets hit. And so I keep thinking there's just something more that's there that we're not seeing. And the Indians, by the way, have had a lot of pitchers like that over the last 10 to 12 years. Who was the kid from Vanderbilt?
Jeremy Sowers.
I thought he was going to be a Cy Young caliber pitcher.
Yeah, he's got a lot of hype.
Because again, I would look at his stuff and I'm like, my God, it's filthy. And I don't know if it's a lack of concentration, because in the big leagues, you have to focus on every single pitch like it's the only battle you're going to fight today. And some guys just they're not built that way mentally. And they drift. And then all of a sudden, and you can drift for three hitters, and you just gave up 3 runs. If you get a base hit, walk, home run. It's like there's no drift. And I don't know if it was with I thought Jeremy was going to be a great pitcher. I really did.
Yeah, he was like seventh. He was seventh overall out of Vanderbilt.
His stuff was just so good. And I'm not saying I don't have that high of a ceiling for Logan Allen in my mind, but he reminds me a little bit of Sowers because I look at his stuff and I'm like, it's there, it's in there. There's just something that hasn't yet been unlocked, and I trust the Guardians will find it because they always do.
You know, Jay, you know this as a pitcher. We talk about command, right? You look at his strikeout to walk ratio; it's terrible.
I know it's
less
awful.
than 2 to 1.
Yes.
So we think about command as being able to throw a strike, which is part of it. But the other part of command is where you put the ball in the strike zone.
100%.
Right? I mean,
Well, there's 9 quadrants.
Right.
And there's one hot quadrant. Every hitter has a hot quadrant. You can't throw it in that quadrant to that hitter.
That's right.
So maybe I don't look at command as balls and strikes at all. You can have great command and get tattooed
you can
every
be throwing
day
strikes, but they're all coming right down the middle.
If you're throwing it in the 5 quadrant, you're done.
So that's something obviously is a part of his game that he has struggled with is command in the strike zone.
Within the strike zone.
You know, I like what they've done with the rotation. I've been saying since the middle of last year, let me see Triston McKenzie in the pen.
Yeah.
And I understand, the whole thing with the surgery, we'll see what happens. But I thought it was a positive.
His velocity's been consistently
Velocity's been up.
So that's a good sign.
You worry about him because he walks a lot of guys, and that's not really good in the bullpen. But you wonder if he can focus on just being a one-inning pitcher.
Yeah.
If maybe, obviously the velocity will go up even more in theory, and maybe he finds it there. Remember, Carlos Carrasco looked like a lost pitcher.
You're right.
And they sent him to the pen. He dominated,
It changed
and
his
it
career.
completely turned his career around.
Yeah.
Not that there's a guarantee that'll happen with McKenzie.
Obviously, there's a difference here with the injury.
Oh, certainly.
But
there's other factors at play. But you never know what's going to turn a guy around. The guy, talk about good stuff, Triston McKenzie's got great stuff.
For all the problems he had last year, he still had a great curve. So now if you would think he could be a 2-pitch pitcher right now.
Yeah, 100%.
Fastball curve.
I would love for him to develop a change, though. I mean, I just think it would be such an advantage to him. Because the curve is a nice change of speed, but you see it coming. It's the second it leaves the hand. But some pitchers tip it before it's even out of a hand.
I just think you need to simplify him right now.
Yes.
Simplify his duty, simplify his role, and try and get him back on track. I'm sure he has much greater aspirations for himself than being a 2-pitch reliever.
Absolutely. But
So
right now,
this is his reality.
I think at some point he's put off the inevitable. At some point, I just feel like it's going to go. His frame, I've said this from the first time I ever laid eyes on him.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
I know.
He's a praying mantis. He has no chance to stay healthy.
It's tough.
And it's been
the only guy I've ever seen not have I can think of that
Pedro.
did not have the surgery, and no, Pedro for being thin, but the only guy I've ever
5'10",
seen
150
that you thought he needed Tommy John surgery, didn't have it, still had a good career, was the Yankees pitcher. Tanaka.
Yeah,
that's the one
true.
everybody
And he
goes
wasn't
to.
as good after, but he was still good.
Aaron Nola, I think it was Aaron Nola, because Zach and I researched this when we wrote about
He
this
did
last
too?
year. Nola did too, and he was okay.
All right.
So I'd have
But it's rare.
But you know
It
what?
is-
It's like the Adrian Peterson example in football.
Right.
He's a freak of nature.
Yeah.
When he came back after ACL in 8 months and was just as good, everybody was like, okay, we got a new timeline now.
Yeah.
No, you don't. You
Right.
had a freak of nature who
Right.
genetically was a fast healer
Yeah.
and was so ridiculously strong to begin with that it didn't knock him off his perch.
Where the tear is matters significantly.
Does?
We did the story last year, and off memory, I don't remember all the details now. But not every case is the same.
I think the preference, I could be wrong, is away from the bone.
I think the lower, the better.
Yes.
I think I'm going off memory, but I think the lower, the better.
I think so too, because I had those discussions when I wanted
Yeah.
to know where's mine. And I do remember that there is a preference, and I do think it's further away from the bone is better. If you think of a rubber band and it's connecting 2 parts and it breaks and you need to fix it, if it breaks in the middle, you can pull a little from each side and bring it together. If it breaks towards the end, how do you reattach it to that with the same, with the same level of strength?
Yeah.
And so that's why I do think it's further away from the bone is preferred. Here's the thing, and this is me trying to be an eternal optimist. If Logan Allen is my 5th starter, and I have Triston McKenzie coming out of the bullpen, knowing that the back end of my pen is ridiculously talented, I'm okay with that. Every rotation has something that you hold your breath on.
Yeah, I would actually argue that their entire pen is very talented. Top
Yeah,
to bottom.
it is. I mean,
and that's with starting a couple of
it's still the strength of their team. To
yeah,
me.
you got a lot, and that's with Ciccone starting the year on the DL and Stephen starting the season.
When does Stephen come back? Do we know? Is he a June middle of the season?
I can't remember exactly what the plan is for him, but they added the veteran Seawald. I mean, they've got a lot of talent in the pitching staff. Luis Ortiz, who they acquired, had a terrible spring training, but I don't worry about that as much.
He's
but
a young guy with great stuff. He struggled before.
I had him on my The reason I was so locked into him is because he was on my fantasy team last year, and so I watched a bunch of his starts with the Pirates. Otherwise, why am I watching the Pirates? But every time he pitched the second half of last year,
there is one other
impressed.
reason to watch the Pirates.
Yeah,
but not when Ortiz is pitching.
I mean, he dominated the Guardians in that start he had.
Yeah, I bet his strikeout to inning the second half of last year was way better than it was for the full season, because it seemed like he was getting a bunch of strikeouts late in the season. But Lively had a tremendous season for the Guardians. They're counting on him to be solid. They don't need him to be spectacular.
I wondered if there was any bruised egos with the playoff roster and the way that played out.
I would think the guy's been a journeyman basically, so I think he's happy just to have
I don't think
if he does again this year what he did last year and they get to the playoffs, I think he's going to be on the roster.
But he was faltering down the stretch.
Yeah,
he
got tired.
He did what he thought.
But man, did he overachieve?
Again, as Zach and I were saying yesterday, and I think I referenced this last week, just the possibility of Bieber, Bibee, and Williams all pitching their best in September. The Guardians could be dangerous in the playoffs.
Absolutely.
If that's it's a somewhat big if, especially with
there.
Bieber. But
tell our audience the stat that you were telling us when we were starting the show. This is mind-boggling.
Oh yeah, so Fangraphs is a great website, and they use analytics to come up with standings and stat predictions for individual players. They have Zach and I were just talking yesterday. That's the reason I looked at it. That we think the American League is completely wide open. Obviously the White Sox are terrible. The Angels and A's are and everybody else is good, but nobody's great on paper. Fangraphs has every team in the American League besides the White Sox predicted to win between 76 and 86 games. And I believe if you take out the A's and the Angels, I might be one of the team. I believe the other 12 teams besides the A's, Angels, and White Sox are all between 80 or 79 and 86.
It's insane.
They have all the American League East teams are within 6 games of each other. All the Central teams besides the White Sox, I think, are within 5 games of each other in the predicted standings. It should be some great races in the American League.
The late former commissioner of the NFL, Pete Rozelle, would be doing cartwheels over that. He wanted mediocrity.
Oh yeah.
He wanted everybody to be 8-8.
I could make a case for 14 teams in the American League making the playoffs, in my opinion.
When was the last time that was the case?
And I could make a case for 12 legitimately making the playoffs. I think the A's and Angels are a stretch, but 12 legitimate teams making the playoffs this year, potentially.
Insane.